The Deep Dive podcast is powered by Atla.im and brings you real stories from the Isle of Man's business community. Hosted by the Atla Group, we explore the journeys of entrepreneurs, business leaders, experts, government representatives, and our own team.
Hello humans, welcome to the Deep Dive podcast brought to you by Martin, that's me,
and Lyle,
that's him, powered by Atla.im. Today we're joined by Travis. Travis, thank you for your time today.
Great to be here.
We're going to talk culture in business. So perhaps for our listeners and our viewers, perhaps just a bit of background on yourself and ultimately how you ended up not necessarily here, but in this culture space.
Sure. No, I hail from South Africa. I'm married and I've got two beautiful girls. And from a professional point of view, I've been involved in leadership or soft skills development up front. And off the back of those workshops and listening to the challenges that delegates face within the corporate context, I ended up in more culture strategy type work. So in essence, partnering organizations to shape and sustain what we would call good culture, walking alongside businesses in that space.
And I know one of the tagline for your business, Apple Tree, is good business is good, or good culture is good business. I guess that's the constant message for when you're dealing with clients.
I've been in the game for 20 years, and I think when I started in 2005, culture was a nice to have, and it was almost pigeonholed for those team building moments or the gatherings that might take place. But we've certainly seen over the course of the last 2 decades much more consciousness into the value of culture, and just looking at basic human rights and the need for more humanized workforces. Culture has become a strategic investment to the bottom line rather than this add-on that you just plug in.
Interesting. So, go on.
I suppose for some additional context, having Travis on the island, a bit of background to the connection with Atla Group, because as we get to this discussion, it would probably be relevant, is we're quite lucky through the mergers and acquisitions, the growth over the last 3 years since Atla's rebrand, the coming together of a number of different entities, different cultures. We were quite lucky that from a leadership point of view, the cultures meshed, and amalgamated really well. But it was last year that we identified a need to define that DNA into a core set of values, and that's where we got in touch with Trav, and the connection came through an incredibly innovative payments and tech business in Durban, South Africa, called iKhokha, run by some friends of ours, Ramsey Daly and Matt Putman. And it was Steph Sneyman who kindly gave us the introduction to Travis. And we liked the way that Trav's involvement at iKhokha had crafted their values into something that wasn't just passport values, which we'll get into later, but statements that we could all relate to. So I suppose that just paints a picture of why you're here again. And we'll talk about a bit of the leadership training stuff later on.
No, certainly. And I mean, having had that first call with you, the idea of coming over to the Isle of Man and getting involved, again, I've just seen, whether it's in South Africa or whether it's in Isle of Man or anywhere else, there's so much benefit to an organization investing in this space. And it's been rewarding to see the investment that's come from Atla in paying attention to the culture. So, thanks for having me over here.
So we'll dig into the passports, the culture aspect. We start these conversations with a quick fire quiz.
Yeah.
We're going to teach you some Manx as part of the process coming from Durban. So you've come across the term yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Has it? Okay.
Yeah, so it's like a Manx. All right, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So that's yes, and then no. So yes, no. So it's a yes, no quiz. So you say, just answer you 5 quick questions, ask you 5 quick questions. It's yes, sir, or no.
Okay.
Or yes, sir. Can you say yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Well, I didn't know, not get any addition to it.
Yes.
Okay.
So we will go just quick fire. So obviously the team's culture here for obvious reasons. Do you believe that a company's culture is more important than its strategy? Yes, sir, or no?
Yes, sir.
Should employees be allowed to challenge the company's core values if they disagree with them?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible for a company to maintain a strong culture while rapidly scaling up?
Yes, sir.
Is it necessary for all employees to fully align with the company's vision and purpose to be successful?
No.
Do you believe that remote work negatively impacts the company's culture?
Ooh. Yeah, no.
Okay,
Quite
thank you.
big
Okay.
debate on that one.
Yeah, so often seems to be on the last question we ask people. So let's understand culture a little bit. Define culture for us.
The simplest definition of culture is it's the way we do things around here. It's a very used definition, and it's because it speaks into the idea that culture is defined by behaviors, perspectives, attitudes, and beliefs. I like the definition that culture is determined by the worst behaviors that we allow, and it might sound like it's quite negative, but it speaks to the fact that we've got to pay attention to how people are interacting, both with each other and across departments. And because it's so behavioral driven, that's where the attention has to be.
And maybe give examples of what you'd consider when you see those cultures working strong or not so strong cultures.
I've just took the banner of collaboration, for example. You've got one behavior which will be thinking beyond self, thinking beyond my patch and my priorities, and genuinely looking to work collaboratively with someone else in your team or with someone else across in another department, versus a behavior which is very much just about getting your job done and almost ignoring requests that are coming from other stakeholders in the business. And that's a very common thing that we find in organizations. And then you can go through to other behaviors like openness and transparency, just being able to respect people, talk to them as another human being. And the world of behaviors is complex and it's broad. And so you've got this big mix of people from diverse backgrounds that all behave in different ways. And in essence, what culture is all about is how do you harness that? How do you align it?
So, and Lyle touched on there that the word passport values, which is a term we've heard you coin. So maybe just talk through what that is and why we classify that as.
Sure. So in the world of values, when we talk about defining them, we've spoken about the rule of fist here at Atla, and it's really about trying to define 3 to 5 values for an organization so that the people can grab onto them. But the beautiful thing about the value space is that we want to look for values that are unique to our business. And if we want to differentiate ourselves, it's also around making sure that those values speak to who we are. A passport value is, for example, integrity, honesty, respect, which you do see in a lot of value sets. But we call them passport values because they should just be inherent values for any society to function. And we don't feel like an organization needs to repeat those in the value set. So have them as a foundation, basic human interactions, basic human values, but decide on the values that are going to be unique and interesting for your people to grab onto.
Yeah. And when we just talk a little bit about, so businesses that build visions, build purposes, and then the values, are they, I assume from a cultural perspective, they're absolutely interlinked.
Yeah, and I suppose you've got to be quite clear on the intention behind putting vision in place, purpose and values, because as soon as you've articulated a vision, articulated purpose, and articulated values, you set your business up for hypocrisy. Because the standard sort of term out there is that, are these just words on the wall? Are they jargon? Are leaders paying lip service to that as this is what we must do as a business? So it's not just about the articulation, it's about the transfer into the business so that it's a lived experience. Globally, we speak about an employee value proposition or an EVP. More organizations are trying to attract talent. In America, we've got the top attractors lists. And the attraction of talent has moved away from just perks and benefits to genuine culture differentiation. But you want to make sure that those that you're recruiting are actually having that lived experience internally. Yeah. That's the big challenge.
And I guess that starts with the leadership in any business. I know you touched on off air about working with clients, that it's important that starts from the very top.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the ultimate outcome of a good culture, we talk about it being twofold. So you've got performance on the one side, which every organization loves to speak about. I mean, we need our businesses to perform. That term, high-performing culture, it's a common term. It's a necessary. And then we talk about employee engagement, a very common term, really just has to do with employee happiness and satisfaction. How do people feel when they pitch up? Do they want to be here? So the holy grail is really being able to find that combination. We don't want high performance and low engagement, and we don't want high engagement and low performance. In essence, culture is around defining high performance and high engagement. And in the middle of that sits the leadership pool of an organization. So if leadership is around creating a culture which produces a lot high engagement and high performance, they have a critical role to play in aligning with those values and the strategy and the DNA and the goals, and transferring it from the words on the wall into the teams that they lead, and also linking the individuals that they lead to that brand value.
It's funny, and I'm sure you're the same, Lyle. In the 16 months we've worked with you, in the early days, when we talk about culture, I've tried to, in my mind, see how you can touch and feel at the end to see the, let's say, the deliverable on it. I'm starting to see that through the journey we're on, and obviously we've done, like in our business, for example, culture surveys. But how do you, various strategies and techniques to feel the pulse of that? How do you do that within a business?
Yeah, so surveys so you want to get into the state of the culture. So we've deployed a few things here at Atla Group and within other organizations. And I like the starting point being a culture conversation. But before you get into measuring and getting metrics, you want to prime the business by opening up the topic. What is culture? These are broad terms that not many people have been able to define. So, as we did with Atla Group, we started by just asking the question, let's define culture. Why have a value in the first place? What's the intention? And then start to speak to the staff around the blockages and the necessary endings that are required and the promoters and the inhibitors to good culture. And what that does is it lays a foundation of intrigue and curiosity as to this thing called culture, which then enables you to be able to take the next step, which is to go and look for actual data. And that can be done through, for example, a survey. Once a survey has resulted in a bunch of numbers, it then gives you the opportunity to go and ask more questions to discover the narrative behind those numbers. So it's putting data at the center, but it's priming it first and then coming back to it again and starting the sort of two-way interaction to make sure that we know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And the purpose of, kind of looked at this as having a common framework for decision making in the beginning, that all leaders, because we had a number of different businesses coming together, we had directors from different businesses coming together, all making decisions, and there wasn't this framework. Do you see that as a kind of valuable for businesses to have a set of values that are used as a framework?
Yeah, we've spoken about the idea of subcultures here. So in actual fact, you can't really say that an organization has a culture. The culture that an employee will experience will be dependent on where they are in the business. Like your business, many businesses have got separate locations, different departments. You've got a head office, and then you've got perhaps it's a retailer with stores out in the world. And so each of those departments, locations are in essence subcultures of the broader culture. And then you've got leaders leading those subcultures. So if culture is all around alignment to strategy and behaviors and perspectives and driving a particular direction, you've got to have a plumb line. And the plumb line is something that we all agree to as what we are willing to align with and be accountable to and come back to when we're making decisions or leading our teams or interacting with others. And that's where the value set comes into play. And in that way, then each of those subcultures is not a massive contradiction or just vastly different to another.
Yeah. So you've got a plumb line to work back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sorry, trying not to cough as well. And what in your career and being in businesses, what are the biggest challenges business see in implementing that culture is? I mean, I guess sometimes if senior management don't buy into it, what are the common challenges that are seen out there?
That I would say is the biggest challenge. If you do have a leadership team that are not bought into the idea of culture and are not genuinely invested in the journey, it's a 3 steps forward, 4 steps back type of scenario. Staff sees through that very quickly. So we've got to be very, very, and that's why I encourage leadership teams, spend the time talking about it. If it takes you a year to decide why you want to invest in culture, then do that. Bat with it. And then when you're ready, enter into that. The second, I guess, massive challenge is time, and that's broken up into 2. I talk about the idea that shaping good culture is a marathon and not a sprint. For those of us who love running, we know that marathons take a bit longer than the 400 meters. So impatience, seeing the results, seeing the changes. You're taking a bunch of people on a journey. It's going to take a while. But then the other thing and it's become such a big deal in the last 2-3 years is just the lack of time that people have. Being able to take people away from their desks to have a conversation, the pressure that people are under, businesses are stressed. So this is where it's important that we are keeping things simple with regard to the development of a culture strategy and leveraging the existing touch points that are within the business, because time is such an enemy of progress.
So to dig in a little bit into values, you've got a nice story which I'm sure you're happy to share here, hopefully, and the seek, destroy business.
Seek, kill, destroy.
Yeah, their values. I quite like the story about when you read that, but then when you talk about the descriptors around how that's lived and breathed by the business. So maybe you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I was speaking about an organization that has 3 values: seek, kill, and destroy, which I think we can agree are not passport values. And that was just such a good example of an organization choosing values which they believe are unique to them. But every word that an organization chooses, and if I think about values that I've seen, like bravery, ownership, own your role, seek, kill, destroy, they are still broad terms. So the first phase is the definition of the value. The second phase is being able to add a descriptor to the value that makes it very clear around how this value should show up in this business. An employee needs to be able to look at that descriptor and go, oh, that's our lived value. If it's clear, then we can equip them to live the value, and they can then be held accountable. So seek, kill, and destroy, for example, seeking was all around how do we actively create a learning environment to be able to look for opportunities. Kill was all around this idea of how do we develop product lines and how do we pitch for work in such a way that's effective. And destroy is around the delivery, collaborative delivery, to be able to make a difference. Another business that I work with had a value of bravery, and it came out of a bit of investigative work into the state of the culture. And one of the core needs within that business was for people to be able to have hard conversations with each other. So bravery in that context, the descriptor was, in this business, I engage with people when there's tension, when there's conflict. I don't go to my senior to fight my battles. But then we had to go through the development phase. How do you actually do that? What are the tools that people need? So it's value, descriptor, equipping and encouraging, and then holding accountable.
Yeah, interesting. I'm gonna pivot really quickly. And just on a personal level, I know you do a lot of athletics. I was also reading online about a fairly long bike ride you did for raising money. So talk a bit about that, because I think it's a nice story that we should share.
Yeah, and that's where Apple Tree came from. And funny enough, in January is my 20-year anniversary doing this work. And when I was finishing school, I was invited by a friend, long story short, to ride a bicycle around the world. By around the world, the route was Joburg to Cape Town, and then across Australia, across America, John O'Groats to Land's End, down Europe, and then back down Africa to Joburg. And we didn't cross countries like Sudan, and at the time there was some issues going on there. So from Nairobi back home, but the vision was to raise 1 million rand for children living with and affected by HIV and AIDS in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. But without talking about the tour, one of the things that I had to do prior to the tour was to speak about it. And it's particularly in front of my own school and the girls' schools in my town. And that was the first time that I've ever stood up and pitched an idea and had negative feedback given back to me. I wasn't a sportsman. I wasn't in first team anything. I was like a 7th team rugby player, and I got a C aggregate, so a very ordinary bloke. And I realized there was a difference between my inner conviction and what I wanted to do and what people thought I was able to do. And so in Australia, while crossing the business, I penned a metaphor called life as an apple tree. And in essence, what it said is that the roots are birth, and then we just climb this trunk. We're just moving up societal progression, school, high school, tertiary education, marriage, kids. Top of the tree is the end. But the apples represented opportunities, and the branches are a lot thinner than the trunk. And what I was doing was stepping onto the branch. And everyone was saying to me, no, stay on the trunk. And I wrote a vision to create an organization called Apple Tree, which would help people pick apples, which at the time was all about human potential. As I got into studying HR and industrial psychology and got to work into corporate, I realized, hang on, an organization is either the greatest promoter of human potential or it's the greatest inhibitor to human potential. And so the vision of Apple Tree ended up being directed into the organizational space. And of course, the many lessons that I learned from cycling around the world and spending a year on a bicycle have been transferred into how I've gone about working with people.
How long did that take?
So the tour was a year, and I think in total we cycled about 17,000 kilometers, which if you think about it over a year is not, if you're doing 100 Ks a day, you've got 170 days of riding. So we had breaks, but successfully came back. I think we raised about 1.7 million. And I still maintain the bicycle is the best way to travel.
Agree.
Yeah, fully integrated into the surroundings.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
You used the word "we" there.
Yeah, so my cycling partner was a guy by the name of Stephen Bonaconza. He was 10 years my senior, hails from Cape Town, had done multiple tours before I met him. This just happened to be his biggest tour yet. And, he came down to work in a church that I was at, and it just so happened that we aligned from a values point of view around making a difference. And, he asked this young 17-year-old to join him, which is a massive deal,
Yeah, absolutely. Fair play. So we'll pivot back to talking about culture. If people listening or firms listening that want to go on this culture journey, where do they start?
I think to go back to what I said earlier is get your leaders in a room and talk. Have the conversation and keep it very honest. It doesn't. You don't even need to communicate to your staff that you're looking at culture. Have the conversation around whether or not culture is worth investing in, and talk about what it actually means to pay attention to it. I would recommend finding a guide or a partner. It's just helpful to have someone that's able to ask questions, who's neutral and who's not emotionally attached to the business. That's what I love about my role is I am able to say anything. Obviously, I use my discernment, but it's important to have someone that can perhaps hold up the mirror. And then if off the back of that, you're ready to take the next step, I would then move into a broader culture conversation with the business, just like you've done at Atla. And then you can start looking for the data that you need to verify certain assumptions and perhaps take perceptions into actual facts. And spend time with that. Run focus groups, get into it, and then you can develop your culture strategy from there.
And with your industrial psychology kind of background, you're obviously well-versed, well-educated, you got all the experience. How would you convince someone who may be skeptical? I mean, we're certainly not skeptical because we're on this journey with you, but just thinking about other businesses, other people out there who might not see that this is very important.
Yeah.
How do you convince them or have that conversation?
Yeah, I generally ask people what their headaches are. Just tell me about the headaches in the business. What's causing you pain points? What's taking your time? What's taking your money? Money talks, and generally, someone might say, well, we've spent a lot of money on hiring or training, or we're losing a lot of people in a certain department, or there's people issues that we've had to kind of fix, or we've got a lot of people that don't take ownership in this business, and we're having to spend a lot of time trying to convince people to take more ownership and go to the next level. Inevitably, a lot of those pain points and headaches and investment of time and money for a manager or for the senior executive team come down to people. And I don't think a lot of leaders have necessarily made the link between those challenges and culture. And when they do, they realize, okay, these are actually culture challenges that's eroding the base of my business. It's eroding the profitability of my business, and it's actually driving up costs. And it's creating headaches for my managers, which in turn means that they are spending time on stuff that they shouldn't. Okay, then it's worth it. It's the ROI challenge in my game. What's the ROI on this? Well, it's hard to pinpoint it exactly, but you will start to feel it in the emotional climate, and you'll start to see it in some of the expenses that were there prior to you investing in the journey.
Yeah, I think going through the journey, we can see that 15, 16 months on. So that ongoing relationship of values, does that, I watched a video, the CEO of Brian Chesney, I think his name is, from Airbnb.
Yeah.
And he talks about the culture, which he just kind of uses like a train, you just continue to shape it. Is that your view, that's continuous? It's not we talk about values on a wall, but there's obviously some shaping going on, but even the verbal shaping of that continues through and develops, I assume. So it's important to continue to check in on it, have the conversations as leaders, I would assume.
Yeah, and perhaps that's why you maybe should keep the values off the wall, because as you're having those conversations, it ebbs and flows. Maybe there's a specific descriptor or even a word that needs some adjusting. If this is a two-way conversation, then it means that, like that tree, it's dynamic, it's going to change day to day, it's getting influenced by different external forces. It has to adapt to those. And if people recognize that that's what the journey is going to be like, an interactive, collaborative journey, then the adjustments can be made. I don't think we need to be stuck on something if it's not working.
Yeah, great. And maybe again, just to finish off, resources, places where people can go and learn a bit more about culture. What would you recommend, outside obviously ringing yourself and having a conversation, that people can learn and educate themselves a bit more?
Yeah, so I think in terms of resources, start reading. I like to read specific books that link into aspects of culture. So if you take, for example, the topic of psychological safety, you're going to read Fearless Organizations, and you pour into that. Or if you want to look at, you were talking about Carol Dweck today, growth mindsets. What does it take to actually shift people out of a comfort zone? Just get into the world of culture through the many books that are out there. It's definitely worth getting a reference, just because there's a lot. I personally really like documentaries and biographies that speak into real case studies. I'm a big fan of, for example, Yvonne Chouinard's book, who owns Patagonia, Let My People Go Surfing. It speaks into an aspect of culture. I enjoyed watching the WeWork documentary. I think it was called We Crashed, To see such a strong investment into a type of culture, but where did it go? Even the BlackBerry story. And then I know that we share a love for sports. Our Chasing the Sun documentaries that speaks about the Springbok rugby culture legacy, which is all around the All Blacks. I haven't paid too much attention to the British football rugby team, but I know there's a lot of good sports coming out of your premiership. So, when you start to just do your own research, you'll find something in there that you resonate with, and you go, okay, I really like that and that and that, and all of that is applicable into what you want to do in your business. And then you can start using those as examples and speak to it. People like story. Use story as much as you can to promote it and to create appetite for it.
And you've got a fairly good feel, I think, for the Isle of Man. So this is only your second visit, but as someone who's kind of doing a lot of listening, what's your perception, and do you have any advice for businesses here? How do you see things?
Well, I think you've got. I said that the first time that I came here, I was almost quite struck by the entrepreneurial nature of the island. And I don't know if that's something that you as locals would agree with, but it just felt like there was an energy on the island with regard to doing good business, a degree of ambition, and I think that certainly sets the case for culture, because if we want to be known as an entrepreneurial space that does well, I know you're trying to attract people to the island, then we want to have businesses that people want to be a part of. So, in terms of the benefits of being out here and living here, they're certainly there. Very strong community-oriented island. I've enjoyed already starting to meet people, finding my local, having conversations with people, find the island to be very friendly. And then you've got obvious benefits like low unemployment and low crime, and it's a safe space to be. But beyond that, people are going to be attracted to the space if they know that they can't. It's not just about carving out a life, but they can do good work. And I think there's actually untapped stories on Isle of Man that perhaps aren't being shared enough with the rest of the world. You've just been pointing out some people to me and telling me what they've done, and I've been, wow, that's interesting, So interesting people, dynamic businesses, strong economy, a lot working for it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we were sitting at Wine Down last night, and Roger Smith walked in at night. I was telling Trav about who Roger Smith was.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to watch the Watchmaker's Apprentice when he gets home.
There's a documentary about this.
But probably good to hear. We all caught up in what we do day to day, and it's a very proud, patriotic nation. So to hear that insights from someone who's only visited twice would be good for the many listeners who are mostly local, I'd say. And then where can people find you? So obviously, online, whether is it LinkedIn? We'll put some notes in the show notes, but do you want to just let us know?
Yeah, I'm online. So obviously on LinkedIn, it's me. And then the company's Apple Tree. So I do have a handle on Instagram and Facebook, Apple Tree Group or Apple Tree SA. I'll have to share the link with you. And then, yeah, just I suppose through LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to reach me.
Okay, but before you wrap up, Martin, just special thanks, obviously, to Steph Salmon, who put us in touch in the beginning. Special thanks to you, Chad, for traveling across the world this time of year to be with us, to spend time with our leadership team, doing some leadership development training, all in line with leading with our values, living the values in mind.
Yeah.
And obviously for your investment into our business and your passion for Atla Group. So we're really grateful to you for that.
Yeah, and if I can say I'm grateful back, I think as I said to your staff, it's so critical that the leadership team invests in this, and I've seen that. And what's been very, very rewarding is to see, well, just off social media, the genuine investment on behalf of your leadership team. So, in terms of the emotional climate that I've seen at Atla, it's certainly very healthy, and it can only go from strength to strength. So, yeah, keep going.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your time, Jarvis.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and watching.